Well, hello and welcome everybody to the first in a series of video interviews with leaders from within the infrastructure space. My name is Chris Jones and I look after the infrastructure space for Odgers Interim. The aim of this series is to bring you some insights from leaders from within the infrastructure space, asking them how their industry has coped with the current coronavirus pandemic, and perhaps more importantly, how they see the future panning out. And with the current lockdown restrictions starting to ease and our thoughts perhaps turning to our summer holidays, who better than to join me on the first chat than Joe Thompson. Joe was until very recently the managing director of Virgin Holidays. Prior to that, had a very successful career in Virgin Atlantic Airlines. So perhaps can give us some perspective on both of those closely entwined sectors. So Joe, I'm delighted you've been able to join me today. And can I perhaps I'll start by asking you how, how the pandemic has affected your industry and how you've managed to cope.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And it's great to be here. I think some of the challenges of both the aviation and broader travel industries that the pandemic have caused are fairly well publicised. An extended period of next to zero demand and next to zero revenue, and for a lot of organisations where there's a significant fixed cost base, and of course in the UK the furlough scheme has helped with regard to employment costs and people costs, but the name of the game has very much been attempting to take all actions to manage cash, that 100% focus on cash, and to attempt to tailor costs to the extent that it's possible to a very low revenue environment. And of course, that's a very difficult trick to pull off. It depends a little bit on the business model, but of course, there are a lot of businesses, and airlines are a very good example of this, where fixed cost bases are very high, and that creates a real challenge. And of course, the other factor that comes into play is the strength of the balance sheet at the going in point. So cash management, focus on reducing fixed cost bases, and sourcing new forms and new sources of capital to fund through this crisis has been very much the name of the game.
Okay. And I guess the $64 million question is, with those lockdown restrictions easing, do you see the demand coming back immediately this summer? Do you see people, we've already seen, I guess, people start to book holidays, but I guess there's still some trepidation out there. How do you see it short term?
Well, I think that we have seen over the last even few days and the last week or so here in the UK, with the prospect of air bridges being formed and some relaxation in terms of the lockdown rules, some surges in demand. So a number of operators are quoting some quite exciting growths in bookings, but of course they're coming from a very low base. So I think we can safely say there's some pent-up demand out there, and there are customers who want to travel, and there are more customers that want to travel than the current regulations permit. But I think there are probably I think about the recovery in demand as being that there are three types of constraint. There's regulatory, what we're allowed to do. There's behavioral, from consumers, what customers want to do, and then there's going to be the economic reality of what customers can afford to do as we face the economic challenges of the recovery. At the moment, it's the regulatory constraint that's kind of the rate determining step. As that starts to relax, we'll start to see what's happening in terms of what customers want to do. But I think at the moment it's safe to say that customers want to travel a bit more than they're allowed to, but we won't really see what that looks like until the relaxation starts to take effect in a slightly more material way.
Yeah, and how do you see, I guess, the longer term? Let's get maybe this summer period out of the way, and of course I appreciate some of this might be dependent on what happens in terms of vaccines or future treatments, but how do you see the longer term future for both airlines and the travel industry? Do you see a brighter future eventually, or is it going to be tough for a number of years?
I do absolutely see a brighter future eventually. I guess that's also got something to do with the going in point. We're at a pretty low ebb at the moment. But I'm positive about the fundamental kind of human desire to travel and to experience everything that travel offers. I think what we will see is a kind of an extended recovery phase where demand is going to continue to be volatile, and there'll be some ups and downs, and the trick for operators will be to separate signal from noise and really see what's happening in terms of underlying demand, and that will depend how that the kind of regulatory constraints and behavioral constraints play against one another. But there's plenty of kind of consumer research out there that shows that consumers want to travel, but they are worried about travel. It's one of the things on which consumers spend money that they are most worried about. So seeing how the industry, together with regulators and government, can put consumers' mind at ease, I think will be critical in terms of what shape that recovery takes. Longer term, I think that kind of human desire to travel will kick in, as long as, and I'm confident that the industry will be able to demonstrate its ability to operate safely, and hopefully we will see some kind of structural fix to the pandemic, whether that's improved treatment, vaccine, whatever form it takes. I don't think we'll necessarily get back to a world that was identical to the old normal, but I think, yeah, I feel positive about the long-term future for travel, and I think the key for all operators right now is to engage a bit of startup thinking. It's going to be volatile, it's going to be uncertain, and the ability to adapt and pivot to the prevailing conditions is going to be absolutely key to navigating the next few months. And I think the recovery is one that will take years.
Yeah. And I guess as well, out of adversity comes opportunity for some players in the market as well. They're potentially, if companies don't adapt quickly enough or don't have those business models that are robust enough, there may well be sort of opportunities for M&A activity, that sort of thing. Do you see there being an appetite for consolidation in some cases, potentially?
Well, I think absolutely it is highly likely that this crisis is going to cause some structural changes in the marketplace. The nature of shocks and crises is that they do tend to cause some fallout in the industry. And I think any crisis also presents opportunity, and the key for any organization is going to be able to demonstrate that ability to adapt, to spot new opportunities, to mitigate the risks in their own business. And while there are going to be lots of challenges through this, there are certainly going to be some opportunities as well.
Yeah, certainly. And are you yourself looking, going to book a holiday yourself? Do you have the confidence at the moment? I guess that's the acid test.
Well, I think I'm probably representative of how the market might move at large. So I've booked a domestic holiday for the relatively near future, and I think if you look at some of the trends in terms of where consumers are interested, I can't resist doing the odd Google Trends search from time to time. It definitely shows a sustained surge in interest for domestic holidays, outperforming some other destinations, and I think that's something that it's entirely understandable in the circumstances. But I'm hopeful that with as long as the kind of current trajectory and overall trajectory in terms of managing the pandemic improves, and of course every organization will be learning how to adapt in these circumstances, that we'll start to see confidence recovering for traveling further afield, international and eventually, and also long haul destinations, not just within Europe.
Yeah, I agree. I think it does come down to confidence, doesn't it? It's we all have that desire to travel, as you mentioned. I think that isn't going to go away in the long term. I think the weather may have an effect on whether we go for staycation or start to look at flight prices again. Maybe, I don't know. But look, from my point of view, it's been great to be able to have some of your insights into the current situation. And I'd like to thank you very much for joining us, and perhaps we can maybe retouch again further down the line and see if some of those predictions and projections have come to fruition. But thank you very much for your time today, Joe. I appreciate it.
Thanks very much, Chris.
Cheers.